and get started. Today, we are here to talk about fruit trees in the home landscape. But before we get started, I just want to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about who I am and what the extension is. I hope you are all familiar with the University of Florida and the Institute for Food and Agricultural Sciences. My name is Alyssa Vinson, and I'm the residential horticulture agent here in Manatee County. Our office is located in Palmetto. And I know that we may have some folks joining us from elsewhere in the state, but this information is kind of tailored to our Southwest Central Florida location, but I think you'll find information that will be useful even if you're not right here in our area. If you are unfamiliar with extension, we are part of the Florida Land Grant University system. There are two land grant universities in the state of Florida. One is the University of Florida, and the other is the Florida Agricultural Mechanical University, or FAMU. And our mission is very simple. It's to take the research that's done at the university level and make it accessible and practical for our communities to use. And so we really want to bring this information to you in a way that allows you to really sustain and enhance your quality of life. We have a robust Master Gardener volunteer program here in Manatee County with over 109 individual volunteers who have gone through an extensive training program that allows them to carry the illustrious title Master Gardener. And one of those folks is going to be speaking to you today about fruit trees in the home landscape. We have John Dawson with us today. He has been a Master Gardener for several years. I'll let him talk a little bit about his tenure with the volunteer program, but I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and let him put his presentation up, and then we'll go ahead and we'll get started. If you have questions during the presentation, please utilize the Q&A function. Because we have so many folks attending today, I have disabled the chat box so it doesn't get too cluttered. So go ahead and submit questions via the Q&A, and I will answer some throughout the presentation, and then we'll also kind of collect some and answer those at the end of John's presentation. All right, I thank you again, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and let John take over with his. Go ahead, John.
Sorry for the delay. All right, good afternoon. My name is John Dawson. I'm a Master Gardener volunteer at the Extension office in Palmetto. I've been a Master Gardener there for the past 13 years. Before that, I lived up in Maryland, and I was a Master Gardener in Southern Maryland. For those folks who may be familiar with Maryland, it's St. Mary's County. I had fruit trees up north, and I've had fruit trees down here as well. So we're going to try to give you some information today that you can use in selecting a fruit tree that will be right for you. And when I say fruit tree, that also includes bushes and vines. So for site selection characteristics, what we're going to do is have you figure out what you have and then learn what you need. Plant selection, we're going to basically try to give you information that will provide you with enough information to select the plant that's right for you in your landscape. And then planting methods and maintenance, will be showing you methods that we've had tried and true right here in the state for many years, and how to maintain your tree once it has been established. And although a lot of the fruit varieties that I'm going to be showing you, it says for Central Florida, quite a few of these will be easily grown in either the temperate zones or some of the subtropicals. But these are mostly the ones that you'll find that grow well in our area. And at the very end, we'll have some information as to available resources you can use. This is a map of Florida. It's basically divided in 3 sections. University of Florida recognizes the northern part as the area in which temperate crops will grow. The southern half of the state, or southern third of the state, is the area in which tropical fruits will grow very well. And in the central part of the state where we're at, this is where you'll find the subtropical plants. Now, there are trees that will grow and do well up in the northern part of the state, but will not thrive or survive in fruit in the southern part of the state, in the south. And then there are plants in the tropical area that will not grow up north as well. However, in the subtropical area, we have our own plants, but then there are some that can be grown from the northern part of the state and also from the southern part of the state. And then there are a few plants that will do well everywhere in the state. So we'll try to differentiate a lot of that and give you some information on which plants do well where. This is a beautiful site. Everybody would like to have this in their backyard. In fact, up north, when it was snowy and cold, this is what I would dream of. I said, one day I'm going to move to Florida and I'm going to grow some citrus trees, oranges, limes, grapefruits. I think there's a law that basically says if you move here from up north, you have to plant citrus when you get here. Unfortunately, in this beautiful scene, those oranges and the orange trees are probably no longer with us because of a disease that's been devastating citrus crops throughout the world, but most particularly here in Florida. And the disease is called citrus greening. It's spread by a little insect called the citrus psyllid. It has infected almost 90% of all the citrus trees in the state. Unfortunately, the disease affects the trees to the point where they cannot bring up nutrients to the upper portion of the tree, and the tree will eventually die within 3 to 5 years. Fruit production basically drops down in the third year, and there's no cure at this time, and there are no workarounds, but a lot of effort and money is being spent in trying to develop both cures and some sort of a procedure in which we might be able to bring back citrus in the very near future. But in the meantime, the University of Florida basically has said that we should stop recommending citrus to our home owners. I've had a lime tree and it was in my yard for 10 years producing all sorts of limes. And the last storm, it blew over. There were hardly any roots. I knew it had citrus greening. It lasted for about 3 years. So basically, if you're tuning in and you want to learn all about citrus, we're going to avoid that at this time, and we'll concentrate on those fruits that are not citrus. So what can we plant if it's not citrus? Well, there are over 250 different species of non-citrus fruit trees that will grow and provide fruit here. I first heard this about 13 years ago when I was viewing a presentation similar to this, where the gentleman made this statement, and I was repeating it for several years until about 5 years ago, I started questioning, wait a minute, I've never been able to see this documented anywhere else before. So I did a lot of personal research, spent at least 3 years, and I'm still continuing. I have identified at least 300. So I'm just going to stay with the 250. Mostly the 300, I'm going to give you information. I can't basically provide that for each and every species there is. But a lot of these fruit, they're available from seed, or you can get the plants from a nursery. So before you do any of that, you have to recognize that planning ahead is the most important step in actually putting a plant in your actual landscape. So you want to make sure you're getting the right plant, you're putting it in the right place, and you're going to plant it the right way at the right time. If you don't do that, then more than likely you will have problems within a few years or even sooner than that. Here's some things you need to consider before you go out and buy a plant. Location. Basically, you need to know where your property sits on the map. You need to know where your house is located as far as north, south, east, and west. You have to find out whether or not you happen to be near a large body of water. This will affect some of the things that we'll be talking about as far as temperature is concerned. What's your lot size? How big do you have? Do you have slopes? Do you have low spots? Do you have high spots? Do you have only a balcony or a small patio that you can actually use? A lot of people live in what we call deed restricted communities. So you have to find out what your home association rules are. Most of the home association folks don't have a problem as long as the trees are not visible from the road. There are other HOAs that basically restrict fruit trees altogether because of what they consider pest problems, in which the fruit would attract various types of pests to come into the area. Shading. Do you have trees on your property right now? Are they providing shade? Where is that shade at? Most fruit trees will not do well in shaded areas. They need full sun. Also, if you're planning to grow a big tree like the one in the bottom right-hand corner, it also provides shade. So if you plant a new small tree next to it, that shade may actually hamper the actual growth of that young tree. The large tree in the bottom right hand is what they call the black sapote. Okay, most fruit trees in the state can be kept down between 10 and 12 feet. If you look up information on any of these trees from where they come from, in this case it's from Central America and Mexico, these trees can be at least 35 feet tall, at which time you have to make sure you have the ability to actually get to the fruit. You have to look out and make sure that if you're going to allow it to grow large and provide shade as well as fruit, that it's not obstructing anything in the overhead as far as power lines are concerned. There are underground obstructions as well. Before you dig in your yard, you need to call 811. This is the capability for which public utilities will come out and mark where their utilities run in your property. The last thing you want to do is dig a hole and then hit something you really don't want to hit. Soil structure. Okay, we're talking about what kind of soil do you have? Is it a new development? Was your house built on top of a area in which they drained an area to put in a retention pond, and they placed a lot of clay in your area and then put a little bit of layer of topsoil on top of that? Or do you have what we mostly have throughout our area, sandy soil? Do you know what your pH is of the soil? Is it alkaline? Is it acidic? We can do these tests at any of the extension office for you. You need to know this information before you start doing your planning for what plant to buy. Water. Do you have water available? Do you have reclaim? Are you using municipal water? Do you happen to have the ability to actually keep it watered for the first 30 days after you plant it? Do you know what kind of water do you have? Do you know whether or not it has salts and chemicals in there? We can do water testing at the extension's office as well. Your abilities, okay? The trees you plant can be in your yard for 30 years or more. As you age, you have to keep in fact that you have to maintain the tree. Are you able to prune? Are you able to provide fertilizer? Are you able to go in there and monitor the tree for insect pests? These things you need to know. Are you going to do this, or are you going to hire someone to do that? Personal preferences, again, a lot of people are not familiar with all the various types of fruit trees that are available down here in Florida. So people from up north, sometimes they'll bring some of their beloved fruit trees, their cherries, their blueberries from Michigan, and they plant them in here and they wonder why they will not grow. So we have different types of fruits that we can actually provide those types of things that you may have had up north. And then I always tell folks, if you're going to select a tree, like a mango, and you haven't decided which variety of mango, there's over 2,000 at this time, you need to be able to try the fruit, make sure it tastes the way you like it. So the worst thing you can do is plant a tree, wait 3 to 5 or 8 to 12 years, and then find out that the fruit from the tree is not something you like. So I always say try before you buy if possible. Okay, site selection, talking about soils again. Do you know what your soil type is? And the way you can find out is look at your property, decide where you want to plant your tree in a nice sunny spot. There's nothing overhead. You don't think there's anything below, but you call 811 to make sure. Now, the only problem with 811 is it will look at public utilities, anything that's private, such as your pool plumbing, your irrigation lines. That's something you need to know where those are all located. And we can help you do that. I have several back articles on how to find and map your underground utilities and irrigation system. So once you find a spot and you want to know how well your soil drains, you need to dig a hole about 12 inches wide in diameter and about 12 inches deep. Fill the hole with water. Wait until the next day. All that water should be gone. If not, then you've got some big time problems. But the next day, fill the hole again with water and then time to see how long it takes for it to drain. Fruit trees, for the most part, do not like having their roots in standing water. More trees have drowned than have died of thirst. If your soil drains within 30 minutes, it must be very porous and very sandy. And you have to realize that if you apply fertilizer and there is a large storm that comes up, it will probably leach through very quickly and it will not provide enough time for the tree to absorb the fertilizer. If the water stays in that hole and hasn't drained within an hour, then you have a problem because there's probably some clay layers underneath that area. And you will not want to plant a tree that happens to have intolerance to any kind of standing water. So if you know that an area in your yard after a large rain is always soggy and there may be puddles sitting there and it doesn't drain within an hour, this is not a spot that you want to plant a fruit tree. However, if you have nowhere else to go, there are several things you can do. This is the pond apple. It's the Annona glabra, which is, it's in the genus of the Annonas, and we'll get to that a little bit later, but this is in the Fakahatchee swamp. It sits in water all the time. Annonas hate having their roots in water. The pond apple is the only fruit within that family that is basically the black sheep. It doesn't mind that. So you could graft various types of Annonas onto the pond apple rootstock and be able to plant that Annona, which hates water, and have it in an area in which case it won't mind having some water there at times. Otherwise, you can dig on mounds. Okay, basically it's a 10-foot diameter mound for a very large tree, or 3 foot if it's a very small tree, and about 1 to 3 feet high, basically getting the tree up and away from those low soggy spots. Trees have various structural roots that they send down, which provide the tree an anchor. so it's not blown over in heavy winds. From that trunk itself, there are feeder roots that go out way past where the leaves are. And this is the system that provides nutrition for the tree. So you want to try to use as much of the original soil, the native soil in your area. You don't want to bring in a truckload of very good soil from somewhere else. If you go out to the various groves, the orange groves especially, almost all of those trees are planted up on mounds. Like I said before, more trees have died from drowning than from lack of water. Another method to try to get around areas that don't drain well is to actually plant trees and bushes in containers, okay? If it's a large bush or tree, you may want to make sure that you have the ability to move it, either with a pallet jack or a dolly, or you may want to actually put it on some sort of a platform with rollers on it. The advantages of containers that they take up less space. If there's a storm coming up or a big freeze that has been scheduled, you can bring them into your garage or someplace where it's nice and warm. It's a lot easier to water, takes up less water and less fertilizer, and you can control the soil pH. What I like to tell people is make sure you buy a plant that's suitable for your landscape. So if it's a plant that requires an acidic soil, but you have an alkaline soil, it's almost impossible to change your entire landscape to meet the needs of the plant. So you want to make sure that the plant meets the needs of your landscape. And if not, try growing it in a container where we can actually control the pH. For folks who are looking for acidic soils, I use a mixture of 50% sphagnum peat and 50% perlite. And that usually gets the pH down between 5.5 and 6, which is great for things like blueberries and miracle fruit. It also forces the tree to become manageable in size. You can actually prune it so it will stay small, but it will require every other year that you take a look at the roots, and you may have to do what they call root pruning to make sure it doesn't overgrow your container. These are just a few plants that you can actually grow in containers, and they do very well. Blueberries, I always tell folks, most of our soil is alkaline. They really, really do love a pH around 4.5 to 5. They have very shallow roots, which do not like to be disturbed. So growing it in a container meets all these requirements. I've grown all my pineapples in containers, and I have miracle fruit, which is the one in the bottom right. And it does extremely well in a container. A lot of plants, if you look up some of the information, it will tell you that they like having their roots tight in a pot. Miracle fruit is one of those. They really like to have their roots nice and tight. Here's a pineapple patch that I had a couple years back. I grow them in containers. These are standard plastic 3-gallon containers. Once they get up to this size, they basically act as sails, and I use gutter nails to actually drive in through the bottom of the plastic to anchor it in the ground. It gets even more top heavy once the pineapple starts to develop. Pineapples usually take between 12 and 18 months, depending on the variety. Once you twist off the top and you put it in the pot, you have to make sure that if it's outside like this, once the fruit starts to get ripe, and I've learned this the hard way, bring it in and allow it to continue to ripen inside that pot. But it basically makes sure that the local critters don't get to it. Pineapples are actually bromeliads. They're basically like air plants. 97% of everything it needs, it gets from the air itself. Only 3% are brought in through the roots, which are quite fibrous. And the roots basically help anchor the plant into the ground. So when you actually apply fertilizer on a pineapple, make sure you're pouring a liquid into the actual crown of the leaves. Okay, light exposure. Like I said, the majority of fruit trees require full sunlight. There are a few exceptions which will tolerate partial shade. And we have to learn that by actually going in and looking at the actual species itself and their requirements for that species. Again, you want to make sure that when you're going to plant the tree, and if you're planting more than one, or if you're planting next to an existing tree or even a structure, you have to consider the mature size of that fruit tree. Now, a lot of times when you look up information for a plant and it's telling you it's in central Mexico and it will grow 35, 25 feet tall if you leave it alone, what happens is once you take the plant out of its natural environment and move it to another environment similar to where it's from, it usually never attains the full size. So what you try to do is see if you can find information which tells you what the full size tree is going to look like as far as height and width when it's planted in Florida. Now, the rule of thumb is that you want to keep any tree at least 25 feet away from all structures, houses, sheds, barns, things of that nature. Fences as well. A lot of people plant their trees close to a fence just to have part of the tree hanging over on their neighbor's property. If you share the fruit, the neighbor may actually like that. However, there's some folks who do not particularly like having the fruit on their side. And by law, they can actually take whatever is hanging over their fence and cut it off. So you want to make sure that you're planting for the mature size. Now, like I said, you can actually keep many of our fruit trees in the state down to 10 to 12 feet, and about 20, 25 feet is about what you want to look for as far as spreading. So think mature size before you plant. When do you want to plant? Late spring and summer is the best time here in Florida. It's when our rainy season starts up again. The air is nice and warm, soil temperatures are warm, plants are in a growing mode, okay? So for the first 30 days, once you put a plant into the ground, you're going to have to make sure that you continue to water it maybe 2-3 times a week so that the roots will not dry out. If you want to plant in late fall and winter, make sure that it is a plant that is tolerant of the temperatures you may expect. If you live in an area in which you get certain times of the year with mild frosts or even a hard frost or a freeze, then you want to make sure this is not the best time of the year to do that. Sometimes in the early fall, you plant the tree, you get it established, and then you get a hard frost just as it's putting out new growth. Most likely you will lose that new growth for that particular year. So keep in mind, best time is late summer, late spring or early summer. Okay. The warmest part of your property is the one that faces south. You'll see that on the eastern side, that's also a warmer area. The area you want to be aware of is the northeast corner and the northern part of the property. This is where you'll get your coolest winds that basically will desiccate your plants, and you may have problems. So if you have a plant or a tree that is not cold tolerant, but it's for your area, you may want to plant it either in the south part of your lawn or on the east side. Also, if you live near a large body of water, it actually keeps the area near your home warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. Sometimes you may get 2 to 3 degrees difference just by being close to your retention pond, a large stream, or a river. If you happen to live near the coast itself, you will be able to get a maybe 3 or 4 degrees difference. Also, if your property has a slope to it, you will always find areas of the property at the top of the slope a lot warmer than areas down at the bottom of the slope. I went out and bought a max min thermometer. It's a little digital thing you can get at any of the box stores, and it digitally records what the temperatures are in a few seconds. So you can walk around your property, usually about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and check the temperatures throughout. The max min also provides you with information of what the maximum temperature was in a 24-hour period or what the minimum temperature of. So you can determine whether or not the temperatures in your landscape happen to meet the predictions that are on your local radio or in your newspapers. I always find that where I'm located, I'm actually about 3 to 4 degrees warmer in the summer than what's predicted in our local newspaper. And in the winter, sometimes I maybe see 2 or 3 degrees difference between what they have in the newspaper. So this is something you have to look for. So various things like walls, they will heat up. So if you plant near a wall with a small vine or a shrub, it will stay a little bit warmer and protect the plant in the wintertime. Now we have this thing called heat zones. Everyone that lives in Florida recognizes that people come here because it's nice and warm most of the year. Where we are in central Florida, in our location, we have a heat zone that's known as 10 through 11, where we have anywhere from 150 to 200 days a year where the average temperature is above 86 degrees. As you get closer to the coast, it stays warmer in the winter, but it also is a little cooler in the summertime. And the further you go inland during the summer, the actual temperatures start to go up again. So you need to know this because there are a lot of times where plants, especially if you're not growing it in the optimum area, once it gets hot, they basically, like people, shut down. They basically say, I'm going to try to keep cool. I'm going to close off and not provide a lot of energy in providing fruit. Conversely, you need to know where you are as far as the USDA plant zones. So the state's plant zones are basically from 8A to what they call 11. And you can see the temperature ranges there. And you can see that it's not a straight line between north, central, and south. So where you see some areas near the coast, you'll actually see a little bit warmer weather. This slide is maybe 10 years old. And if you recognize that we really haven't had any cold weather, at least in our area, for the last 10 years, that sometimes you can edge up a bit. Where we are in Manatee County, it's normally zones 9A through 10A. We do have an area out near the coast, which is probably now around 10B. So when you look at a selection in a catalog or in a nursery, and you ask what the best planting zone is for that particular plant, they will provide you with that information. So this is a pretty good guide. I haven't been able to find one that's been up to date, but that's what we have. Chilling units. Everybody remembers, if you're from up north, that during the wintertime, everything becomes dormant. The leaves drop, and basically the trees go into hibernation. So these trees require this rest period so that they're not constantly growing. And in the spring, as the air and soil temperatures get warmer, it's basically a clue to basically say, okay, nap's over, I need to start growing again. So when we look at chilling hours, it's any hour where the temperature is between 33, above freezing, to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. So in our area, we see that Manatee County average is about 240, and usually within Central Florida, it's anywhere from 210 to maybe 310. What this means is if you have a temperate fruit that you want to grow, you have to determine what the chilling hours are for that fruit. Now, here's a list of a lot of fruit that you may be familiar with if you're from up north. Only the ones that are in blue are the ones that basically do well in Central Florida. Up north, you have to look at what your temperature units are for chilling. And you see that a lot of fruit have wide ranges. So various varieties have different capabilities. Some may tolerate cold, some may not require so many chilling hours, and some may have a very long chilling requirement. This is a publication put out by the University of Florida. People came down to Florida in the late 40s, basically because of the central air conditioning that was available at the time. And they wanted to plant a lot of their stone fruits they were familiar with up north: peaches, pears, plums, cherries, blueberries, and things like that. And they just wouldn't do well down here. So the University of Florida in the early 50s developed what they called a low chill fruit program, in which they were trying to develop fruit that people were familiar with up north that will do well down here in Florida. So they do a lot of breeding to try to bring down the requirements for chilling. And you can see where it's brought, the actual charts have north, central, and south. People ask me, can you grow raspberries in the central part of the state? And I normally say, well, yes. Some folks in the northern half of the central part can grow the Dormer Red, and in the southern part, you can grow the Mysore. And the only problem is, if you really like the store-bought red raspberries, the Dormer Red is a red, but it basically has no flavor whatsoever. So you would be very disappointed. Now, the Mysore actually grows as far south as Miami, but it is a black raspberry, not a blackberry, but a black raspberry. So if you really, really want to grow raspberries, you can grow them as annuals here, just like we do strawberries, okay? So, University of Florida was one of 4 that started in the early 50s. One was in Israel, another down in South Africa, and another over in the University of California. So this has been going on for quite a number of years. Peaches have been one that has really developed over the last several years. Early on, the low chill peach was kind of small, didn't have a whole lot of sweetness to it because it takes time for sugars to develop. But over the years, they've been developing newer varieties, and they have more sugars, and the size have gotten a little bit bigger. Will it replace the South Carolina and Georgia peaches? Probably not. But if you really enjoy a peach, you might try one of these. Now, people ask, what's the difference between melting and non-melting? A non-melting peach is one that you can remember back to your childhood when you bit into that peach and the juice would squirt all over and it'd get all over your shirt. That's a melting peach. Non-melting is the one you'll normally find in the grocery store where basically juice will not become squirting out as you take a bite out of it. Also, people want to know what a cling peach is. This is one where you cut it open and part of the pulp will actually cling to the stone that's in the center. And you'll see that certain trees are patented and certain trees are not patented. When we get to talking about propagation methods and grafting, you have to understand that you can only do that with fruit that is not patented. If it is still patented, you have to get permission from the patent owner before you do so. Okay, watering. Rainfall is probably your best method of irrigating your trees. If you notice out in the wilderness, there's no one irrigating the trees other than Mother Nature herself. However, to establish a new plant, you need water for at least the best 30 days. And if you're going to start when the rainy season begins, Florida can actually do most of your watering for you. However, once the rains start to diminish, you may have to water your plants every now and then as they start to dry out. And you want to use a good quality, well reclaimed or city water if you can find it. I've killed many miracle fruit seedlings because I used municipal water. The miracle fruit cannot tolerate any kind of chlorine or the chemicals to put in there for fluorine for your teeth or something like that. And there are many plants that do not tolerate salt. So salt tolerance is something you need to think about if you live near a large body of water, or if your reclaim or if your well water has large amounts of salt in that as well. Now you can take a sample of your water to any of the extension offices and we can test that and provide you with a number which provides you with the actual salt content in the water itself. Because of all the construction and people moving down to Florida, we are having problems with providing enough water to everybody. So there are areas, mostly in our area as well, where water restrictions are in effect. So please make sure your irrigation system is placed on that day in which you're allowed to water. Now, those restriction rules do not apply for the first 30 days after you establish your plant in the ground. Okay, now we're actually going to talk about plant selection itself. How do I go about choosing? I mean, there's a lot of them out there, so what do I do? Well, the first thing you do not want to do is run out to your local box store and go out to the section where all the little fruit trees are standing there. And they have little pretty pictures showing you what it's going to look like. A lot of times they will have a tag on it there and it just says mango. Okay, so the question is, all right, which mango is it? There's various varieties out there, over 2,000, and not all of them actually fruit at the same time. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. A lot of times you may actually find somebody willing to sell the avocado that's considered the guacamole avocado, the Hass avocado. The Hass avocado, the true Hass, will not grow here in Florida, will not do well. Over the last several years, they developed a Florida Hass. Many of the Rare Fruit Council folks that I happen to be a member of, we went out and planted some of these trees. However, they were quite disappointing. They weren't exactly the Hass you're mostly familiar with. So buyer beware. Also, sometimes you'll see these things called cocktail fruit trees. So you say, okay, I don't have enough room to buy or plant 5 different types of citrus or 5 different types of avocado. So I'm just going to buy one plant that has them all in the same plant. They're all grafted. The only problem is that some of these fruit will develop faster than others and have different requirements for nutrition. And they will muscle out the other fruit that's on the tree as well. So maybe after a year or two, you'll find 1 or 2 or just 1 still left on the plant because it has muscled out every other one. Okay. Most folks going to a nursery or going to a big box store and they're looking at the fruit trees, the first thing they want to do is they want to see the fruit. They want to make sure that mango actually has mangoes on it, that the avocados are starting to have avocados on it. Avoid doing so. And the reason is that the growers and providers force feed the plants to actually start fruiting while they're in the pot. Most people take that plant home, they put it in the ground. They're not fertilizing it for the first 30 days. And when they do fertilize, they may do it improperly. And they call in and say, what happened to my plant? It had fruit, now it doesn't have fruit. And now I don't have any fruit. It's been over a year. And that's because you're not providing the same amount of nutrition and force feeding that plant as they were in the grower. And basically it gets stressed because it's not provided the same amount of nutrition as it was when it was in the pot. So avoid doing so. Okay, this may be a little boring for folks, but it's very important. All about taxonomy. A lot of people use the common name for all sorts of fruit. The problem is that common names may be different in different areas of the country, the state, or in the world. There are actually 4 trees called strawberry trees. They grow on 4 different continents. They're not related to each other. The fruit do not look like strawberries or taste like strawberries. And the only reason they're called strawberry trees is because the flowers actually looked exactly like a strawberry flower. So if you wanted to buy one and you wanted to put it in here in the US, in the state of Florida, there's one growing in Palmasola, you have to make sure you're getting the exact binomial name, the genus and species and variety. So in their plant kingdom, there are over 400 families of edible fruit, of which the Annonaceae family is one. And within that Annonaceae family, there are over 120 genera, which is the plural for genus, of which Annona happens to be one. And within the Annona genus, there's over 320 species, of which Squamosa happens to be one. You also remember that the Annona glabra, the pond apple, that's also another species. But within the Annona squamosa, within the squamosa species, there's over 5 varietals. 2 that do well here are the lesser Thai, which is one, the green one on your left, and the Kampong mauve, which is the reddish one. Okay. Now, that's a lot of fruit. So when you actually want a lesser tie, the green one that you see there, you have to ask and make sure you're getting a tag that says Annona squamosa lesser tie. Here's the black sapote fruit. Remember the big tree in the lower right-hand corner? I said that's a black sapote. This is the fruit. It's dark brown inside. And most people would not want to eat something that has soft, dark brown fruit. But it's also known as the chocolate pudding fruit. Put it in the fridge for about 10 minutes, take a scoop out with a spoon, and you'd swear you were eating chocolate pudding. Now, what does that have to do with this? Remember, we're talking about genus and binomial names. The black sapote. It's in this family, the Aviaceae. There is a white sapote. There's a yellow sapote, also called a canistel. There's a green sapote. None of those are related to each other. The word sapote is a Mayan word for sweet, soft fruit, okay? So if you were to plant a sapote, you would generalize and say, well, you can plant all of them the exact same way, and they're all going to do exactly what you would expect. And that would be wrong. And the reason is that the black sapote is mostly dioecious. That means there's both a male and a female tree. And then there's one that basically has a hermaphroditic tendency, both male and female flowers on the same plant. The white sapote is monoecious. It has perfect flowers. It has both male and female flowers on the same plant. Now, whereas the white sapote can be grown almost throughout central Florida without any problems, it has very good cold tolerance. The black sapote will only grow in those areas around 10A and 10B. Okay. Now, I've grown many of the sapotes and the annones. These are two little seedlings from seeds that I acquired at this year's Christmas party. Somebody made chocolate brownies using the black sapote fruit. And they also brought in the seeds they used. Now, knowing the black sapote, you would have to know that those seeds are only viable for about a week, no more. I planted 6 seeds. 3 plants actually came up. 1 quickly died. These 2 are left. So which one's which? Is it male? Is it female? Or is it both? Problem is, it takes anywhere from 5 to 6 years before it starts to flower, and then you'll know what you have. Okay, so if you're buying a tree, just be aware that if you have a requirement for both male and female trees, if you plant only one, you're not going to get any fruit. If you have a female tree and there happens to be another black sapote somewhere in your neighborhood within a 2-mile radius, it may be okay, but I doubt seriously that'll be what happens. Almost all fruit trees sold by nurseries and what have you are grafted trees. That means that there is a rootstock. Okay, this is a stock that's considered a healthy plant, resistant to disease, provides good nutrient uptake. And what you do is you take the scion, what they call the portion of the tree you want to graft to that rootstock, and then you'll do a grafting technique, put it on top, and that way you'll know exactly what you're going to get. Now, if you grow from seed, it may take 5 to 6 years or more, depending on the variety that you have, before you actually see flowers, and then another year before you see fruit. And then we always recommend that first year of fruit that you actually pick the fruit off. Don't allow it to actually form. That allows the tree to provide more strength through the roots. So once folks come in and they realize that their citrus tree has died, they always ask, what can I plant? one of the first things I tell them to do is go to FruitScapes, which happens to be a University of Florida website. Is excellent. Everything you need to know about Florida fruit is in this website, regardless of where in the state you happen to reside. So you can just Google FruitScapes :IFAS, and this will come up. I had the number 59 basically because there's actually 59 non-citrus fruits that grow well in our area here in Central Florida. However, the website is set up for the entire state. So you have videos and you also have publications. So general information as far as how to plant a fruit tree. Okay, say you're interested in growing carambola, the star fruit. Maybe you have one at a party, somebody had it out on a relish tray, and you really liked it. So you'd like to know a little bit more about carambola. Okay, so you can watch your video, or you can get the publication that tells you everything you need to know about growing carambola in the Florida home landscape. This is Dr. Crane. He happens to be the professor of tropical fruits down in Homestead. He appears in most of these videos and has written most of the publications that you will find on the website. So if you go to the publication for carambola, this will pop up. You can download it as a PDF form. So it tells you that it happens to be in the Oxalidaceae family, and some of the relatives are Belimbia and Oxalis, or Oxalis, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Most folks will recognize this as the weed that grows in your yard that looks, for the folks who are up north, like clover. Okay, so you'll find that fruit trees have a lot of different family members that may not even be fruit. It comes out of Southeast Asia. Okay, and they were brought to Florida many years ago. There's the history. And people have to be aware that there are certain fruits that are hazardous to your health. Some have been actually known to kill people. So if you've been diagnosed with any kind of kidney disease, if you have kidney stones, especially the oxalic acid kidney stones, you really need to consult with your doctor. And if all you get is a kidney stone once every so many years, it's probably okay. But if you have any kind of renal disease, really, you need to look and ask your doctor if it's okay. I have been able to find at least 2 confirmed deaths from people who have eaten carambola, but they were very sick and they had problems. What's nice about the publications is that it's basically a carambola for dummies. It basically tells you month by month what you should be doing, including applying any kind of fertilizer, micronutrients, which you spray on the tree, any applications of iron, which you place around the bottom of the tree, how do you go about watering, any kind of insects you should be looking for, anything as far as disease control, pruning, when to, and other information, okay? It also tells you not only what fertilizer, but how much to apply, and we'll get to that in a minute. Here's carambola grown in a small container. You've got about a dozen fruit on that tree, okay? So carambola can be grown on your patio, your lanai, and it will put out fruit. The fruit tree itself, if you left it grow to its natural height, will produce over 300 pounds of fruit or more every year, okay? That's a lot of carambola, and most of those will wind up on the ground, and they will attract various types of critters who actually like fruit as well. Planting and care is very important. Once you've decided, hey, I know what I want, okay, let's go through the checklist. Remember what we were talking about at the very beginning? Location. Okay, I found the right spot. There's nothing underground that is going to be a hazard. HOA says it's okay. There's no other trees around. I plan on keeping it between 10 and 12 feet. There's no public utilities in the way. I've had both the soil pH checked. I've also checked the water. There's no salts in there. I'm using reclaim. I should be okay with this, okay? I can handle the pruning. I can handle the irrigation and the various types of fertilization. And I've actually tasted the fruit and I really like it, okay? So shading. Some fruit trees, like the black sapote and a few others, can be part of your landscape and actually provide shade as well, which means you'd have to prune the bottom portion of the tree to allow people to sit under it. Okay, right. My grandfather always told me, when you're buying tools, buy the best tool that you can afford. It will last a lifetime. Same thing with your fruit tree. Buy the best you can afford. That means no bargain basement hunting. Just realize that fruit trees usually come in different size containers, everything from a 1-gallon pot all the way up to huge burlap wrapped trees. The bigger they get, the more expensive they become. Do not buy sight unseen. Stay off the internet. If you're going to buy seed from someplace, make sure that, hey, if you're buying a seed like black sapote, that seed doesn't become viable any longer if it's more than a week old. So if it takes 2 or 3 days to ship, you have no idea how long it's been sitting in their warehouse, leave it alone. Don't buy bare root trees from up north if you're living way south. It's always best to ask around and find a reputable nursery in your area and ask for their source of rootstock, okay? So if you're up north or in the central part like we are, and the source of stock happens to be down in Miami-Dade County, it may not do well in your area. So if you find a nursery that's basically raising the trees in your area, those are the best ones to find because they're acclimated to your temperature. Leave trees with fruit on them alone, okay? It will only be a problem. Look for a tree with good structure. If you're looking for a fruit tree that has a central leader, make sure it only has one up the middle. Any lateral branches coming off should be what we call in U's, look like a U coming off the side instead of a V. You don't want any sharp angles coming off of lateral limbs. If you see a plant you like, give it a good shake. Look underneath the leaves. So if you shake it and you see insects falling off or flying away, try another nursery, okay? If you see that it just doesn't look right, it's got burn spots, yellow areas, leave those alone as well. Never buy a tree thinking that you're going to get a bargain and you're going to nurse it back to health. Never works out right. You want to check the roots. Before you do so, please ask permission of who happens to be there. You want to make sure that it's not been sitting in that pot forever and that the roots are actually girdling, meaning it hits the side of the pot and starts to go around in a circle. Not good. You want to make sure that the tag provides the actual botanical name and variety, okay? I have actually bought a tree. It happened to be a crepe myrtle, not a fruit tree. And I wanted a lilac version of it. And I planted it, and when it actually put out flowers, it was all white. It was the Natchez variety. Fortunately, the nursery at which I bought the tree, I took it back, and they gave me a new one. Not everybody will do that, so ask what the return and warranty policy is. Sometimes fruit tags will go missing. Also, if you get a wire ring around the fruit tree and it has the name and tag and everything on that, when you plant it, make sure you take it off. You don't want that wire ring to get embedded into the trunk. Okay, so you don't want to buy a tree. Maybe your neighbor has one that you really like, or you know somebody in the family that has one. You can plant from seed. That's basic of all fruit trees. Fruit provides seeds, okay? Just have to realize that some fruit trees, the seed has to be planted right away. You have to make sure the fruit is at least 90% ripe before you gather the seed. And you have to realize that sometimes a seed will take a long time before you actually get fruit from a tree. I planted a mango seed one time down in Miami. Took 17 years before that first mango came off the tree. So, you know, if you're not willing to wait that long, you might want to buy a grafted tree in which you might find fruit within the first 3 to 5 years. Now you can actually take cutting from some trees. That's basically looking at the first 6 or 8 inches of a growing area on the tree, a new growth, stripping off the bottom area, using some growth hormone, and then planting it and making sure it stays moist. We have various classes that we provide throughout the year, and you'll find them throughout the various extension office in propagating plants. So look for those when they become available. Sometimes in a fruit tree, you can actually use air layering, in which you basically find a limb that is growing vertically. Go up to the first foot or two that has good growth. Strip away about an inch and a half of the outer bark, getting down to the cambium area. Use the rooting hormone. Get some sphagnum moss. Make sure it's nice and wet. Rinse it out so it's nice and moist. Wrap it with plastic, real tight so the ants can't get into it. And then cover it with aluminum foil to keep the sun from cooking it. Within a month or maybe a little bit longer, you can take the foil off and you should see some roots coming out. You can then cut the bottom area off the limb and then put the upper area in a pot with the roots. So if a grafted tree puts out fruit in 3 to 5, you may be able to see fruit from an air layered tree that will be maybe from 5 to 8 years before you actually see, depending on variety. There are various types of grafting methods. We will be teaching some grafting courses in the future here as well, once everything gets off of the virus problems. So most fruit trees are sold as grafted trees only because you control the top portion of the graft, which is the tree you're looking for. Some people will take existing fruit trees and cut off the limb and then graft onto an existing limb for a newer variety. And I'll show you that in a few minutes as well. This is where you need to pay very good attention because a fruit tree may be in your property for 30 years or more. But if you don't plant it correctly, it may die in another year or two. Okay. So what you want to do is dig a hole about the same size as the pot container it came in, or if it's in a burlap, up to where the edge of the burlap and the bottom of the burlap have to meet. Do not place anything other than the soil you remove from the hole back into the hole, okay? And you always want to make sure that when you put it in, that you place it down in the bottom, at least 2 or 3 inches should be above the soil line, okay? So where the plant was growing in the pot, you want to make sure that area is at least 2 to 3 inches high. Most trees are planted too low, and usually within 3 years, they start to go bad on you, and it may die. If you plant it high, eventually it will actually sink a little bit anyway. Do not add any kind of fertilizers at this time. Do not mix anything into the soil. Do not fill the hole full of water and then place the tree inside. Place it in the hole and put the soil that was removed from the hole back in, and make sure your plant is nice and tight inside that hole itself. Place mulch all around the tree. Make sure it's at least 8 to 12 inches away from the trunk. You don't want any kind of problems with rotting problems in that area. And do not fertilize for the first month. Okay. So if you plant a tree that has circling roots, this is what it'll look like once you dig it up. It'll normally show problems up at the top because the tree's unable to support itself and the feeder roots aren't going out. It's not getting any nutrition. So a lot of times I'll tell people that if you're having problems in the top part of the tree, it's usually because there's a problem underneath the soil. Okay. So you don't want to start with trouble. So if you actually open up your burlap bag or the pot and you see the roots starting to circle around, go get another tree. Now, if it's just a slight circling, you can actually cut the root and make sure it straightens itself out. But if it's one of the structural roots, you want to make sure it's actually going to go down and provide a good anchor for your tree. Also, if it's in a little pot like this and the roots are coming out, what you want to try to do is spread out the roots as much as possible. If you are planting a tree that's a grafted tree, make sure that that junction where the graft happens to be is at least 2 inches above that soil line. A lot of times people ask, well, how long do I need to stake the tree? Well, most fruit trees should not need a stake. If you buy one out of a nursery and it happens to be tied to a stick or a stake, you might want to avoid buying that tree. It basically has been growing up supported by that stake. A tree has various lignins and structures inside that as it's growing up and blowing in the wind, it actually will harden those areas and make that trunk stronger. If it's not allowed to move, those lignins will not move out to those areas and harden that trunk. So you will have a weaker tree. So if you are going to stake it, make sure it has some move to actually swerve back and forth a little bit. Do not leave that on for more than 2 years. Less than 1 is preferred. Okay, and if you can avoid, don't stake at all. Pruning. This is like every other tree you may have in your yard. Obviously, all dead and broken branches should be taken off. Suckers, if it's below the fruit tree graft joint, okay, make sure you always remove those. What is happening is that the rootstock is trying to grow its own tree. So if you were talking about a citrus tree, and it's on a sour orange rootstock, okay? If you're not careful, it will send up a sucker. There's one down here at the bottom, A, and it will try to grow a sour orange tree, and it will take a lot of energy away from whatever tree you had. I know this from experience. I had a little lime tree, and one day I went out and looked, and there's this huge lime on the tree, several of them. Well, that doesn't even look like a lime. It wasn't. It was a sour orange. I looked down and noticed that one of those suckers had actually grown it very quickly, and I actually wound up cutting it off. So any interior branches that are rubbing within each other or growing straight up, sometimes they'll call them water sprouts. If you have a citrus tree, they're easy to identify. The actual sucker goes straight up. Citrus has thorns. The suckers will not. And no fruit will grow actually on those suckers. So those are all to be removed. Any limbs that are growing down toward the ground, make sure they're removed as well. And if you're looking for shade, you want to make sure those bottom limbs are pruned off. These are both mango trees. Like I said, in their native environment, this is in Colombia. It can be anywhere from 35 to 40 feet tall. This is a very old tree. This is Norris Ledesma. She's down in Miami, fruit tree curator. The mango tree that she's kneeling in front of is only about 3.5, 4 feet tall. So you can see that it actually has mangoes on it as well. Mangoes. This is a plantation grown the old way. These trees are anywhere from 25 to 30 feet tall. There's only 6 feet separating the trees themselves. And you have to be able to spray all the trees whenever they have a disease problem, such as anthracnose or powdery mildew. You have to apply certain types of nutrient sprays throughout the year. And once the fruit develops, it's always on the outside of the tree where the sun is. Okay, there's no fruit on the inside of the tree. So when there's a tree this tall and the fruit is 20 feet up in the air, you need long poles to actually gather it. Sometimes if you go to the store and you buy a mango and you open it up and there's a mushy spot, that's where the mango hit the ground. So the new way of growing mangoes in plantations is to make sure the trees are at least 10 feet separated, that they're only allowed to grow between 10 to 12 feet tall, and that the interior of the tree is spread out. There's only about 3 or 4 lateral branches from the bottom. The bottom area has been about 4 feet. It'll look like this. The top picture is looking down from above. Mangoes will actually grow in those areas in the center where they would normally have not have grown. There's more air circulation throughout the tree, keeping any kind of fungus diseases in check. And it's much easier to actually spray the tree for any kind of fertilizers. It takes up less water, requires less fertilizers, and it actually puts out as much, if not more, fruit than the old version. So when you actually need to fertilize your tree, when the publication says you should, this is the proper way to do it. Look at your tree. When it rains, the water drips down from the furthest area of the leaves. This is your drip line, okay? When you put a fertilizer down, a fertilizer bag, a granular fertilizer for fruit trees, you want to make sure that you spread that evenly 1 foot inside and 1 foot outside of that drip line, like the little scheme on the right. Avoid using those fertilizer spikes, okay? They seem like it'd be an easier way to do it, but it doesn't provide uniform coverage to the feeder roots that are growing out in a 360 pattern. So a lot of times you'll put the fertilizer spike and those feeder roots will tend to grow to where the fertilizer happens to be. And will not provide uniform coverage. And if you only put 4 out, it's not providing enough fertilizer. And next year, if you put 4 out in a separate spot, you now have your feeder roots in an area where the old spike used to be, and now there's not enough feeder roots in where the new spike is. So avoid fertilizer spikes. Here's a fertilization table for mango. Okay, these are for mango trees grown throughout the state. Several counties have what they call a fertilizer ordinance that takes effect from June 1st, next week after next, to September 30th, in which you do not put down nitrogen fertilizer in your lawns or your landscaping where your fruit trees happen to be. So you see on this one, this is a table for fertilizers for your mango. And it tells you the first year, this is the first year you plant it, okay? So if it's in a container, it's a 3-gallon container, that's usually a tree that's 3 years old, okay? So even though it's 3 years old, the first year that you plant it, these are recommendations. 6 times a year you should be putting it in. how much per tree, total amount for the year, and it will tell you at the bottom what the fertilizer should be. It says slow release fertilizer, that's for nitrogen. And after the first three numbers, NPK is your nitrogen, your phosphorus, and your potassium. And then the number 2 at the end is your magnesium, okay? Our soils are usually lack in magnesium. They're essential for the tree's growth. And if you put too much of nitrogen down, it basically inhibits the amount of magnesium the tree can bring in. Also, certain areas in our area, in the central part of the state, sit on top of what we call phosphate. Phosphate mining is done here. In which case, you want to make sure your middle number, the P, is actually 0. So in our ordinance in Manatee County, not only can we not put down nitrogen, we cannot put down phosphorus at any time. That's because it's in the soil and the trees have it available to them. Too much phosphorus, the trees don't use it, it goes into the watershed, okay? And it causes all sorts of problems with algae bloom. So we don't want to put too much phosphorus into the watershed. Okay, I need to relate to people that fertilizer is not food, okay? Plants get their food basically from the sun. Photosynthesis produces sugars and starches, okay? We get our food by eating plants or eating animals that eat plants. So we're basically getting the same type of requirements you'll see on a multivitamin label here. You'll see the minerals that are being used in that. And here's the minerals on a fertilizer bag. We have a lot in common, okay? So a lot of folks, when they see their tree and it's not doing well, their first inclination is it needs more water. And it's usually not the case whatsoever. Or they get the idea that, oh, it needs more food, so I'm going to throw fertilizer down. So unless it happens to be your time of the year to actually put fertilizer down, don't do so, because the tree will not use any excess fertilizer. Fertilize often with small amounts. Don't put all the fertilizer down all at once. Don't overwater. And make sure you're not going to put fertilizer down if rain is forecast within the next 24 hours, okay? Water the ground, not the leaves. Try to water as much as you can during early in the morning, not late in the evening. And again, pick off first year fruit. You want to develop good roots first. I mean, if you waited 3 years or 5 years, all of a sudden the fruit's coming out, the last thing you want to do is wait another year. But really, you want to do that if you want that tree to last a long time and produce even more fruit the next year. Critters and pests. If you grow fruit, you can't keep the critters away. So you either grow more than you need and allow those critters to take what they want, or you can try to prevent the critters from getting to your fruit. The little picture on the bottom left is a cage containing blueberry plants. I grew this up in north as well. My neighbor had lots of blueberries. I helped them build a cage using fine screen in which bees and insects can go through the screen, but birds and critters could not. An easy trick, if you want to keep the raccoons from actually getting to your mangoes, take the ones that you really want, take some old window screening. So when you're repairing screening on your lanai or your windows, save some, and then take the screen, put it around the fruit, and staple it together. That'll keep the raccoons away, and they'll all go off and try to find some other fruit elsewhere. Here's the usual suspects. Little comedy here. My daughter calls raccoons trash pandas. I had a problem this early spring. I had a Barbados cherry tree putting out all sorts of cherries. So it's almost impossible for me to get a cherry off of that without finding a little hole in it where the birds have been pecking on it. So early on, I went out to go get a cherry off the tree, and I noticed that there were actually 4 branches that had been broken off. And that's where one of these heavy raccoons decided to go up into the tree and try to get the cherries off there as well. So just realize these guys are out there. When folks call in and say, what's wrong with my tree? I usually go through this list here. And these are certain things you can do yourself. Check your leaves every now and then. It's called integrated pest management. You want to check it, if you can, every week or every other week, depending on how busy you happen to be. See if there's any insects on there. Always look at the bottom of the leaf as well. That's where they like to hide. If you see all sorts of black, sooty mold type things on your leaves, look up a little bit further. There's usually insects sucking the sugars out of your leaves, okay? Then you can try to identify the insects, or we can do that for you at the extension office and tell you how you can control them, okay? Mechanical damage. Most fruit trees are killed by weed eaters or accidental bumps by your rotting lawnmower, okay? Picture's down at the bottom right. After a while, the tree just decides, I can't take this anymore. Wherever it happens to be a gash in the tree, invites all sorts of bacterials and problems of rotting and things like that. The tree in the upper right looks as though it's an animal damage, either rabbits or any kind of gnawing rodent or even deer, okay? Did you plant it in the right place? Is it old enough? Most people call in and they say, yeah, I planted this tree last year and there's no fruit. Well, it may only be about 3 years old and it may require 5 years before fruit show up. So I tell them, hey, look, it might be another 2 years or so. And when they do develop, make sure you pluck the fruit off. Is it getting enough water? Usually that's not the case. Is it being overwatered? That is usually the case. Girdling, did you leave that metal tag on? If you had a burlap tree, did you forget to take the wire wrap off the burlap or the string off the burlap? Was it pruned properly? Did you over prune it? Normally you shouldn't take more than 1/3 of any given time of pruning of a tree. Is it being shaded by another tree or another object? And is it getting enough sex? That is, do you have a male? It's never going to put any fruit unless you find yourself a female tree. Or you may have a problem with not enough pollinators in your area. So let's take a look at some of the fruit crops that we can grow. I normally start off telling folks that their best bet, if you want a hedge or a small fruit or something reliable, you don't have to do any kind of maintenance with whatsoever. Plant a Florida native. Once it's established, you basically allow Florida to take care of it. Most of these fruit can be eaten out of hand, but again, a lot of these fruits are made into jams and jellies or wine. Okay, here's the pond apple again, elderberry wine, tastes mighty fine. There's over 75 in our area alone. A native fruit is basically any fruit that was here when the first European settlers came in and discovered Florida. And this is what they found. Muscadine grape is a native, grows here very well. Every now and then you'll find it in the store as an eating grape, okay? We used to have at least 2 wineries in our area that used the muscadine grape hybridized with one of the old European grapes, and they would grow wine. Is Florida a great wine industry right now? Of course not, but it's not that bad. Here's the mango. Most people like growing mangoes, okay? They will not acclimate here. So they can withstand cold temperatures anywhere from 25 to 28 degrees. Trees that have been in the ground for 3 years, up to 5 years, that's their cold tolerance. A brand new young tree may or may not tolerate a freeze whatsoever. I planted a mango one time back in 2009. We had a week of extremely cold temperatures and it killed the tree. They do not like having their feet wet, and they don't like having salt anywhere in their water. Now, if you happen to have fruit trees growing in an area where you're near the water, there's a large storm, a hurricane, tropical storm, blows a lot of water inland, some of that water can be salty. It seems intuitive, but the best thing you can do is after everything's settled down, go out and hose off your tree. Try to get as much salt off of it as possible. There are two types of seed types, monoembryonic and polyembryonic. Mono meaning only one and poly meaning more than one. And there's a lot of old cultivars here as well. And wherever you see FruitScapes, there's a video showing these things. Tommy Atkins and Kent are the ones you might find in the store. Every year there's fruit festivals throughout the state, and a lot of them feature the mango. Back in 2017, down in Pine Island in Lee County, there was a mango festival. They had over 118 mangoes to be tested, taste tested. People were supposed to rate them from 1 to 10, where 1 was the worst, 10 being the best. Here you see 2 mangoes. The one on the left is a Pickering. It's a polyembryonic mango. What that means is that if a seed falls off the tree and volunteers itself, or you take the seed and you plant it in the ground, it will grow into a Pickering mango tree that provides the same mangoes as the one you tasted. On the right is the Tommy Atkins. It's a monoembryonic mango, meaning that you need both male and female trees to set fruit, and that the fruit you are eating, if you plant that seed and wait for it to grow, like I did for 17 years, you'll find out that it doesn't resemble anything like the one you tasted, okay? So I made that mistake. Don't want you guys to make the same. So we're looking at the taste test. What you'll see is that the Pickering came in at number 7, meaning there were at least 43 different mangoes that tasted better than the Pickering. The Tommy Atkins is the one you'll find in the store. It came in at number 2. Not very good. That means there was over 91 different mangoes that tasted better than the one you normally find in the store. The reason is that the Tommy Atkins ships well and has a long shelf life. So you'll see fruit in the grocery stores. They'll be sitting there. And what you'll find is that there is much better fruit to be had if you buy it fresh or you grow your own. So lesson to be learned. Those big strawberries that have no taste, the mangoes that are basically not as sweet as you think they are, it's basically because they last long on the grocery shelf. I have a copy of the results of the test. It shows at this part, a variety called Sweet Tart was one of the best. Another one was Cotton Candy. And then at the bottom, these are varieties that they no longer say you should grow because of the susceptibility to various types of diseases like anthracnose or city mole. And you'll see even the latest variety, Lemon Zest, is one that you shouldn't. And then we have the old variety, Kent, is one you should no longer consider as well. Also, you'll notice on the chart, there's different times of the year, different mangoes ripen at different times of the year. So what I tell folks who are seasonal, that they need to get a mango that ripens at the time they happen to be here, okay? So if you're only here during the time in the wintertime, the last thing you want to do is find a mango that only puts out fruit in July. So there are mangoes that will actually come ripe even in December. So I have these available at the Extension office in Palmetto, along with a large list of my research. It's on a Excel spreadsheet. I can't send it via email, but if you drop by, you're more welcome to have it. Mangoes are in the Anacardiaceae family. Now, families are put together by things that bring them into something that they can all relate to. In this case, it's a compound found in these trees that's called urushiol. Mangoes are related to poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac, the Brazilian pepper, hog plums, cashews, and pistachios, okay? Most of the urushiol in a mango is in the sap. There is a slight amount in the actual skin. So people who've never eaten a mango before and they bite into the skin, several seconds later, they may have puffy lips because of the urushiol that's in there. So just be aware, some people get contact dermatitis from picking mangoes. I have a nephew that broke out in a terrible rash. So there are certain family members that will cause problems. Avocado is basically the second fruit that we get a lot of questions about. A lot of these slides I have are from presentations that are about 10 years old that Dr. Crane put together. So a lot of the varieties are some of the older varieties you may see. There are basically two types of mangoes, type A and type B. It was believed years ago that you need at least one of each for a lot of good fruit development. However, some of the newer varieties have both male, female, or type A, type B, and some have both type A and type B flowers on at the same time. Avocados are not very strong in hard winds, so you want to make sure if you know which way the wind normally blows during a hard storm, usually off the coast, you may want to put it on the other side if you have the ability to put it on the other side of your house so you have a windbreak. Basically, the ones that grow here are the Guatemalan hybrids with the West Indians. The Haas, again, does not grow well here. There is a Florida Haas that was supposed to be promising, but it didn't turn out to be too well. Avocados, like mangoes, fruit at different times of the year. So if you want guacamole all year round, you basically need to pick the exact variety that will come true in fruit at the time that you're going to be here. So if you want mangoes all year round, you could plant these three and you'll be in good shape. I also have a list of mangoes. What happened here? Oh, okay. I also have a list that shows exactly when they actually will fruit. And I do have some ratings from 1 to 5. People often ask me when I'm talking about fruit, what does it taste like? Well, the problem is my taste and your taste will be probably totally different. And I may tell you it will taste just like a Balimbi or a Loquat. And if you don't know what those are, you wouldn't have a frame of reference. So the type A flower basically functions as female the first part of the day, and then later on, the second day, it becomes male. The male flowers come out. The type B is the exact opposite. So back in the old days, in order to get good fruit development, you need one of each. They have since found out that they actually will stay open longer so that your pollinators still have a chance to come in and pollinate your tree. If you're not selling the fruit commercially, then basically you'll get all the avocados you need. Avoid growing those avocados from seed, like the science experiments you had in elementary school. They will never come true to the avocado you were eating, okay? So you may not have any idea what it's gonna wind up with. Again, waiting 8 to 12 or more years and find out you have an avocado you don't like. I have a friend who basically grafted 8 different types of avocados on one single tree. So he would have avocados all year round, depending on the varieties that he grafted on the tree. So he took an existing avocado tree, You'll see the existing tree happens to have the one with the leaves still on it. And he grafted onto the existing limbs the avocados he now wanted. Those limbs are painted white because the original leaves from the original tree was providing shading for those areas, and you don't want to overheat those graft areas. So it basically keeps the limbs cooler. Bananas, there's three types: the sweet, starchy, and those that are basically ornamental, basically for their foliage. Bananas will only grow on a single stalk once and not again. So if a banana comes up and it puts out fruit, that stalk will never put out fruit again. They like a lot of water. They're basically water hogs. The temperatures after the outside temperature gets to be on average around 45 degrees, they basically stop the growing process. And if you do have a hard freeze, don't worry about it. They will come back up again. They're grown in what they call mass. You want to grow it so that you have a banana plant that is coming up and will put out fruits 1 year. And then you want to have another plant that's down below that'll put out fruit the next year, and then have what they call a pup or a seedling coming up along the side. Now, if you have more pups than you need, what you can do is take a shovel with a straight edge on it, go straight down the stalk, and separate that pup from the mother plant and be able to plant it elsewhere. I grew a variety called F1. It comes out so that when it's slightly green, you can use it as a starchy banana. And when it was fully yellow, then it became a sweet banana. Blueberries, like I said, I recommend growing in containers. You do need at least 2 for cross-pollination. The southern high bush is the only one that does well in central Florida. The rabbit eye will grow up in the northern parts. Blueberries do not do well down in the far south. This slide I basically usually keep toward the end. It's called pitaya, or what you know in the store as dragon fruit. It's one of those fruit that haven't been around that long, but it's from Central America and Mexico. Full with lycopene. It's a cactus. Basically, it grows almost like a vine. There's 3 types. Ones that are red on the outside, white on the inside, red on the outside, red on the inside. And then there's a yellow variety that's a lot smaller that is yellow on the outside and white on the inside. It is one that has some really nasty thorns on it. So I had that one and I've gotten rid of it. The fruit's real small and I got stuck every time I tried picking the fruit. This is my palm tree, sable palm, in my backyard where I grow my pitaya. I have 3 varieties growing on there right now. This is a close-up of what they look like. One of the reasons we plant fruit is that you go to the store and sometimes these things will sell for $4 or $5 a piece, which I normally wouldn't buy. So you can save money by doing it this way. And again, you pick it right off the cactus itself, put it in the refrigerator for about 10 minutes, slice it open, and just spoon it out. And the reason I put the slide out is because 2 nights ago, they started to flower. Now, the dragon fruit will put out a flowering bud. It looks like it's starting to open up. At that point, what you want to do is sneak out at about 10, 11 o'clock at night once it's really dark, and then you can go take a picture. This flower is 9 inches across. The next day, the flower goes away. It just kind of droops. So you can see that there's about 20 of them on this right now. in about 28 days, depending on the variety, you'll have a dragon fruit ready to pick and eat. It's usually grown by a cutting. So wherever you see a little section like this here, you can cut it off at that point. You put it in the ground for about 2 inches, put it up against a tree and basically tie it off with like a green string. Eventually it'll put out little hairy rootlets that will adhere itself to the tree itself. This particular one here was taken a couple of days before a hurricane hit. I had no clue as to what may happen to it. It blew down a Barbados cherry tree I had growing, and it also blew down a lime tree that had been diseased. But I did not lose any of these whatsoever. Once they're on that tree, it won't come off. Here's fig. It was first brought to Florida back in the 1570s by the Spanish explorers, Ponce de Leon and his crew. They brought with them several figs, and they didn't realize it at the time, but they actually brought the pollinators, a fig wasp, with them. The earlier figs required this fig wasp to basically pollinate the fig itself and develop fruit. The Spaniards then decided to move westward, and as they were moving westward, they took their figs with them. But this time, they forgot to bring the pollinators with them, and the figs wouldn't develop fruit. So over the years, fig breeders have come up with what they call parthenocarpic fruit. That means they develop without the need of pollination. Easily grown in containers. Down in the bottom right, you'll see a green fig, okay? Normally what happens is figs come out green, and then they start to turn brown. This is a color cue, basically saying I'm ripe. Birds and all sorts of other furry friends are out there. They will grab your figs, unless you're out there real early in the morning to grab them up yourself. However, there are several varieties of green figs that never turn color, which means the birds are confused, the fuzzy critters are confused, but you have to go out there and actually feel, give it a little pinch to see if it's ready yet. So if you have problems with critters, that's the one you probably want to get. Japoticaba, okay, they come from Brazil. It looks almost like a crepe myrtle tree, slow grower. Doesn't get very big at all. The one we have in our gardens is only about 8 feet tall. It puts out these little berries that are about the size of a muscadine grape. Very cold tolerant. Puts out fruit, depending on the variety, 3 or 4 times a year. And the very cool thing is that when it starts to flower, it actually looks like somebody took little cotton balls and pasted them all over the trunk. And when the fruit develops right on the trunk itself. That's a little boy back in Brazil, and you can see a little mango tree in the background. I tell people it tastes like a cross between a cherry and a grape. There's at least 15 varieties that you can grow here. Some are yellow, some are red. This is the standard dark black one. Not only is it good, you can make it into a jam, and in Brazil, they make an excellent liqueur and wine out of it. Here's the jackfruit. It's the largest of all tree fruit. In Thailand, they've had fruit that weighed as much as 75 pounds. We had a tree in our educational garden that put 4 or 5 fruit out every year that weighed about 20 to 22 pounds, okay? Hardly anything bothers it. The leaves actually look like a magnolia, okay? Very nice, beautiful little tree. You can keep it down between 10 and 12 feet, no problems. In Thailand, the tree can grow up to be 45, 50 feet tall. Vegans use the jackfruit in several states, the pulp, the green fruit, and they use it as a meat substitute. In fact, up on the upper left is a pulled jackfruit sandwich. I imagine if you put enough barbecue sauce on anything, it'll taste good. The fruit itself is this little pulp that happens to be wrapped around this little seed. People ask me, what does it taste like? I say it's something like a cross between cantaloupe and juicy fruit gum. And the seeds themselves can be roasted and eaten like chestnuts. Here's the lychee or lychee, depending on how you want to pronounce it. It's from Asia. Very sweet, very finicky. It puts out a lot of fruit one year, and then a year or two later, it may put out only a little bit or none whatsoever. It likes a nice cool dry period during the fall and winter. So if we have a wet winter, don't expect a whole lot of fruit. Again, every one of these publications will tell you what to do month by month, and it'll tell you do not apply nitrogen-containing fertilizers between September and March, and hold off on the irrigation as well. A lot of different varieties. Mauritius is the one that we have in the extension garden. It does well. There are problems. Some people, it's a beautiful tree and they put it in their front yard and they'll go away for an hour or two to go shopping and they'll come back and all their fruit's gone. So either people have pilfered it or a flock of birds have come in and basically taken all your lychees away. Here's a longan. It's almost like a second cousin to the lychee, but it's from Central America itself. It has almost the exact same growing requirements. I happen to prefer these a little bit more than I do the lychee itself. Here's a loquat, also known as the Japanese plum. Very addictive. It's like eating potato chips. Once you start, you can't stop. It's one of the earlier fruiting varieties in our area, usually sometime late February and early March. Extremely cold tolerant tree, easy to grow from seed. Numerous cultivars, which is the same as variety. There's even one known as Bradenton, so you know it does well here. It's an old slide, so it says Caribbean fruit flies. However, Florida's done a very good job on controlling those through a eradication process. Here's papaya, extremely fast growing. You can plant seeds in December and have fruit in October. It has both male, female, and what they call polygamous or hermaphroditic trees growing from seed. Dr. Crane puts out a video in which he shows you how to actually take fruit from the grocery store, prepare the seed, plant the seed, and then look at your trees. It doesn't take as long for the tree to come up, but if you plant a seed and what you see is nothing but male flowers like the one on the right, you will not have fruit. And if you have a male and a female, that's fine. Only the female will put out fruit. What you're really hoping is that you'll get a bisexual plant, which you will have both male and female flowers on the same tree. And here are the odds. Normally what they say is plant at least 3. Then hopefully you'll get what you want, is a papaya that puts out fruit, okay? If you buy one from a nursery, they can basically guarantee it's going to be a fruiting tree because it is already flowered. Also, if you buy a fruit in the store, it's usually one that has been hand pollinated by the growers, which means there's a larger variety of seed that is probably going to be giving you the hermaphroditic plant. Okay. If you grow from seed outside and you want to save the seed from your fruit, you just need to know that as the temperatures get really high, you wind up with more male seeds than you will any others. Pomegranates. You'll see at the top that here is the Euophyphus citrus extension, and it's under a category of alternative crops. So basically, if the citrus industry was to cave, we're looking for alternative crops. Two that are mentioned are pomegranates and olives. They will both grow here. The olives are not the eating kind. They're the kind you actually press into oil. There's over 150 different varieties of pomegranates that will grow well here in Florida. A lady that happens to be the ex-president of the Pomegranate Fruit Growers Association, Cindy Weinstein, has a farm in Zolfo Springs, Florida. She was given a grant by the University of Florida. She has over 150 varieties there. They were trying to determine what plants do well in our area, also looking for where to put a processing plant, because even if you grow pomegranates, you have to ship them up to Georgia, which happens to be the nearest processing plant. Now, I happen to have gone to the one in 2016. She used to have a pomegranate field day where you can come in and taste the various types of pomegranates that she was growing. You'd have to check to see if she's still doing that. All right, we're talking about resources. If you go to the University of Florida has a website called EDIS, which is the distribution of educational publications. You can Google EDIS or go up to the website up there, edis.ifas.ufl.edu. Go to the search and it will provide you with any kind of information you may be needing, or go to FruitScapes itself. That's another place to go. Also, there is a publication called Dooryard Fruit Varieties. You can put that in your search engine there. It basically is it's a publication that gives you about the same information I just did on a small number of plants. There's an excellent bookstore, IFAS bookstore publication you can get, SP 171, on a large number of variety. Wherever I put 28 species, it's always because I'm talking about Central Florida. So this will basically be able to tell you how to prop any kind of fruit plants within the entire state. You're up north or down south. Like I said, most extension offices will provide courses on propagating fruit plants. It will also tell you, there's a back index on the back end of that, what fruits you can graft, what fruits you can actually grow from cuttings, and what fruits you can actually air layer. Not all fruit trees can be done the same way. They can all be planted by seed. Folks down in Sarasota, there's two master gardeners down there, Karen and Liette, put together a very good website on what things you can grow in Florida. It's called Growables. Not only fruit, but also vegetables, okay? So if you go inside, you'll see a whole list of fruit. And some of these you may or may not recognize. It gives you a lot of information. The number 70, again, is basically saying there's at least 70 fruits that will do well here in Central Florida. So here's information on the carambola again. A little different format, gives you a lot of information about height and spread. Now these ladies put a lot of information. When you see height and spread here, it's usually height and spread here in Florida. And again, this is if you allow the tree to grow without pruning it for height. Not only that, but if you go down here, it will tell you that both the flowers and leaves are edible. Just beware that the flowers and leaves also have that oxalic acid that they were warning you about. This is our fruit tree garden at the Extension office here in Palmetto. We received these trees as a gift from the Manatee Rare Fruit Council. There are rare fruit councils throughout the state. If you go to the Manatee Rare Fruit Council, mrfc.org, down at the bottom right, it has a list of all the various types of rare fruit council or fruit clubs throughout the state. If one's nearby, I suggest you go to one of their meetings. The ones we have here in Palmetto are at the Extension office the second Monday in every month. It's from 7 to 9. We also have the rare fruit folks have a demonstration garden at Palmasola Botanical Park. If you happen to be in the area, this is a beautiful place to see all sorts of flowers and things. But on the left side of this small lake or large pond are over 68 different varieties of fruit trees that will grow here. These are trees that you can see for yourself, what they will look like. Sometimes they'll have fruit on them. We prefer you don't pick them and eat them, but you'll be able to see what they look like. And there are some citrus still in there, not as many as there used to be. But when you're in the area, come and take a look at it. We also put out a newsletter that's available to you for anybody throughout the state. It's basically focusing on Manatee County, but a lot of it has to do with all sorts of things Florida-wise. Last month's issue or this month's issue was based on insects. It was our bug month. So we're talking everything from beetles, stick insects, how insects see things. So it comes to you in by email. You can sign up for it, and we'll be more than happy to give it to you every month. It's in color. If you're in our area, we have them at libraries as well, but they're in black and white. So, open for questions.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you all hanging on there. We still have 138 folks or 135 folks that are with us. If you do have a question that you haven't typed into the question and answer box, please go ahead and do so at this time. I've been answering questions throughout, and since we are running up at 3 o'clock here, there's one question that I held to the end because I couldn't answer because it asks what is your favorite, John, peach variety that is the melting kind that would grow here in our area or in North Florida. Do you have a favorite peach variety?
Well, it happens to be the one that we grow at our extension office, Florida Prince.
All right, Florida Prince. And I do have to say, I got to eat one of our Florida Prince fruits as we were taking care of the garden here in the last couple months, and it was quite delicious. So I would say it's probably one of my favorites as well. Please look for us on Facebook. We do have Twitter and Instagram as well. We tend to post kind of across all of our different platforms. We have more webinars coming up soon. And we plan to do more of these types of conversations via Facebook Live as well. So if you're interested, we will have coming up some kind of Ask an Agent Anything webinars that will be on Facebook Live as well as on Zoom. And those are opportunities for you to interface with folks like me who are, various experts in all the different topics that we deal with at Extension. And again, I just want to thank you all very much. And I want to thank John for doing an excellent presentation today. Great job, John.
Thank you.
We have a wealth of information available to us. If you have questions, please feel free to send an email to manateemg@gmail.com. Or you can email me directly at alyvinson@ufl.edu, and I'll be happy to answer your questions if I can. And if not, I'll probably give it to one of the volunteers to answer because they know way more than I do. So again, thank you so much and have a great day, everyone. We'll go ahead and end the meeting.
Thank you.